In a previous life, I was an A-10 driver, and A stands for attack. And when I first started about 8 years ago studying Islam, after about 3 years of just doing nothing but that and letting my wife know I was not converting, she was very happy to hear that. But I realized there was some action that needed to take place. And shortly after we started a group down in San Antonio, we started another group called Truth in Textbooks. And truthandtextbooks.com, our mission was to focus on the facts and returning facts back to the classroom where so much of the information that our students were receiving was incorrect. And we did that here in Texas because they were beginning to review social studies textbooks. Backstop a little bit to, in 1975, the Saudi Arabian government, using the oil money, went out to the Stanford Research Institute and says, we have a problem. Israel's viewed very positively, the Middle East and Islam is viewed very negatively. We need to change that and switch that around. So they paid $6.2 million to the Stanford Research Institute to give them a business plan, and their business plan has been implemented perfectly, and it involved three things. First of all, bring as many of your students from the Middle East, beginning in as soon as you can in the late 70s, 80s, bring them to our universities and begin to get graduate degrees, doctoral degrees, and do them in as many of the soft sciences as you can. International relations, business relations, religious studies. And for those of us who remember that period of time, we started to see Middle East studies students begin to flood the universities and have them write dissertations on the Crusades, about the plight of the Palestinians, begin to write research about how Israel controls the media and controls Wall Street, write about how wonderful Islam and Muslims are, and begin to criticize Western civilization and begin to chip away at dividing the Judeo-Christian nation that we are by taking away little things like the hyphen. You don't see the word Judeo-Christian written in our textbooks anymore, and there's a reason why that's the case. Divide Jews and Christians into different groups. The second thing was to begin to establish Middle East studies departments. In 1975, there were no Middle East studies department, but Stanford and many other universities, and now there are over 70 of those, began to receive millions of dollars from all the oil coming over here and establish sites and universities saying, now let's have Middle East Studies Department and we'll bring who we want to come over and teach you about our version of Islam. And they began to do that, and many of these liberal universities were not going to turn away that money. And as soon as they start, and you had the Muslim Student Associations who had started here in 1963, so they already had a foothold. So those two things put something in place, and as they began to write those dissertations and those, the master's thesis, what are textbooks made of? They're made of research and new research. And where's the most liberal place in the country? California. So they established 3 think tanks out there and to help funnel this technical information, this new history, into the social studies textbooks and to the publishers. And their job was to put it into the textbooks. And where's the best place to do that? In California. California is the largest purchaser of textbooks in the country. And by doing that, many other states, there are 28 states that have district by district, they're not being able to choose and get the publishers to create textbooks for them. They're having to pull something off the shelf. And many of them pulled the California textbooks off the shelf. And now that's spread throughout the country. And we fast forward to Texas, where in 2014 we began our group. And if you divide the room about right here, there's about 50 people here and about 50 people there. Imagine if you could sit there today and say to yourself, we 50 people changed what 5 million children are going to study for the next 10 years. 50 people did that. Some of them were Texans, some of them were outside of Texas. But virtually, we all came together and put this effort together. And as average citizens, and as I had one of the rhinos on the State Board of Education looked at me and said, well, what makes you qualified to do this? I said, well, first of all, I'm a high school graduate, I'm a fighter pilot, Rotarian, and my mother breastfed me. And I said, none of those things make a friggin' bit of difference. All you need to do is look at the textbook, and if in our comments, if it's incorrect and we've put the sources, then you change your book. If our information is wrong, then we'll fix our report. They didn't ask any of our gray-haired folks who came up after that and say, what are your qualifications? Because they started pointing out when jihad was not properly described, when they began to describe the life of Muhammad and that Jews and Christians were all treated equally in the Middle East as Muhammad was growing up. And we saw this time and time again, no matter what publisher. And as we started this process, we were told, oh, you won't find many errors. We found over 1,500 errors that the social studies experts who had looked at the textbooks had said, we write them, we say they're okay. We got, because of the testimony of these volunteers, and I'm here because of them. So it wasn't anything I did. It was because of these volunteers. But 60% of the errors that we found were corrected or eliminated because of the effort of these 50 people. And because of that, my phone started ringing off the hook. Because suddenly now California wanted help, Florida wanted help, Tennessee wanted help. And that's where we've gone with the effort in exposing not just Islam and about Israel, because there's so much disinformation about Israel. They're always made to look so bad, and the Palestinians are always the poor, pitiful me. And there's always two sides of the coin. So we wanted to make sure that both sides, opinions disguised as facts, are not facts. So we went back and started doing this, and suddenly we had volunteers from around the country, and we have nearly 200 volunteers that we've trained. And if nothing else from here, you can walk out of this meeting today and listen to all these speakers. But I'm giving you an opportunity to do something. You can't be a TV host. You can't be pretty like Frank and be on the radio. Maybe I mixed those up. Anyway, I think I mixed those up. Or have the courage of Chris Galbutz to go out there and do what he does. Or to write for Breitbart, or any of those things. But I'll be damned if each and every one of you have the ability to sit at your computer right now and send an email, read something, download a picture, upload a picture, and read for an hour a day. Raise your hand. Thanks for volunteering. We'll get your names right after this. Bottom line is you could be making a difference in the children in Florida. And we've gone down to Florida, and sure enough, we just looked at the books in Tennessee, and this is a smoking gun we just found out yesterday. We did something that publishers have never done. They wrote back to us to say, well, we disagree with your findings, this is what we would do. Or we agreed with them, and we're going to make the changes. Well, sure enough, Tennessee is buying some of the same books that Texas has. And when we compared what those texts were with what they had agreed to fix, whoops, it didn't turn out so well. They're not making the changes to the Tennessee books, so we're going to be telling the Tennessee folks, guess what? You're getting books that they've already admitted had errors in it, but you're going to give you the error-filled books. We're not going to make those corrections. They don't know we've done that yet, so they don't need the publishers yet. But our little secret, bottom line is we're going to call it like we see it and expose that. But that's what our volunteers do. That's how we'll take back America, by getting our children. Because when they did a study, 19 to 28-year-olds, in a recent YouGov survey, they said, is socialism acceptable? And 43% of the young people said absolutely. And when they said, is socialism preferable over capitalism, 43% said yes, and only about 32% said no. That explains why Bernie Sanders can have the amount of influence and get the number of votes in Washington State and many other places, because they don't know anything about communism, about Islam. When we saw discussions about how fair Islam was to all religions, we pointed out, well, there's no discussions in here about the 800 Jews whose heads were chopped off in Medina. Let's have that discussion. Let's talk about Aisha and the wives, and how child brides are, well, and we had CARE, and this is part of the other intimidation factor. Besides, and what teacher is going to come up and say, oh, I disagree with that? That teacher is now going to be looked in the teacher's lounge, oh, you're one of those haters. They can't get up and say that, and they're not even going to do that in the review. Or if a teacher who is concerned, as a teacher down in Houston did, he put out some great information, accurate information. He actually got it off of liberal websites and presented it, and CARE came out and immediately called for his resignation, and within 24 hours, the school had terminated. Mayor Beth Van Dyne right here took a whipping over the clock boy because of what she did here, and she stood her ground and did a great fight. Plano, many other places around the state, teachers who have done the right thing, who have talked about Islam in the proper way, accurately, by telling the truth. And thanks for making the plug about G4:16. It comes from Galatians 4:16. When Paul went back to the Galatians to tell them about, hey, Jews, anybody can be a Christian. It's not just you. Well, suddenly, now I'm not your friend for telling you the truth. And that's what Paul said. I'm no longer your friend because I'm telling you the truth. We're telling people the truth about Islam. That's not on you. That's not on me because you hate me now. That's on you. My mission as a Christian is to be able to tell the truth and do it in a loving way and do it in an honest way. And that's what Jesus has called us all to do. So it's a spiritual mission for me, and I'm very honored to be up here today. If you want more information about how to get involved or know other places I can talk to without a gimpy leg, I'll be happy to come talk afterwards. Frank, thanks for having me today. It's really been a pleasure.